Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert, Mr. Ian Barnard, and the incredibly talented South African illustrator, Lisa Gland. We are sadly not joined by our good friend Mr. Dustin Lee today. He hasn't got internet at his new house, so it's nothing too worrying, guys. But this week we are talking about how to make work that stands out. The world has never been a busier place, so it is essential to be different in order to get people's attention. Today, we break down the actionable steps of how you can actually do this. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys.
Hey.
Let's try and make this sound natural. We definitely didn't just record 15 minutes of this episode and then I realized I had not set my microphone up right and now we're restarting it. That definitely didn't happen.
We're really sort of pushing out how good quality we are at doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
How professional. Hey,
Yeah.
we don't want to give you guys subpar audio, so I was like, got to cut it here.
That's why the honest designers, not the professional designers.
Exactly.
Oh god, that brand would have fallen apart years ago. Wouldn't have lasted a week. So yeah, today we are talking all about how to get your work to stand out. And it's almost like I know what I'm about to say because I've just said it. But just
weird.
on the spot thinking, guys, I had a notion for me getting your work to stand out. It's so important because really it's what makes you spring to mind for people. It's what gets you remembered, it's what gets you recommended, all of that good stuff that is essentially your brand. And if you're not trying to attain that, the opposite of that is being generic, being forgettable, being invisible, essentially. And clearly that is not going to work well for you. So we agreed that, it is a very, very good idea to stand out in a positive way, to differentiate, to stand out from the crowd.
Oh, 100%. Otherwise, you're just going to blend in with, as you said, the sea of everything that's going on out there.
And I would say that is what most people are doing. Probably even most of the lovely listeners for this episode feel a bit like they're getting lost in the crowd, right?
And the thing is, I actually think there's a lot of people that do well just doing that. And there's nothing wrong with it from a point of view if you're earning a decent living and you're getting by and all that kind of stuff. But if you actually want to progress to a level where people, as you said, Tom, think of an area of a particular design and you spring to mind, that if that's your goal, then the first thing you have to really think about, how do I actually stand out? And what you were saying on the first recording.
It's going to be a very nostalgic episode, guys. Harking back to 15 minutes away.
Exactly. There's a couple of things, because I asked the question, like, what is it about somebody that makes you feel that, that they stand out? What are the qualities? And we discuss things like bringing in your personality and looking at your style and having a distinctive style and possibly a signature palette and things like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So episode done. We've done a nice summarization. So I think so I've got 4 points here, and I think let's divvy them up to who kind of raised them initially. So I've got your kind of spin you put on things, and your personality and your shtick I've written, and that was one that you mentioned, Lisa. So shall we maybe start with that?
Yeah. So if I just use what I do for a living as an example, you're selling products to a market that is essentially totally saturated. You obviously need to find a way to stand out, and a couple of things that I always think about and hopefully achieve is how do I get my personality across, and how do I approach this trending subject, because I think that's also quite important, is finding a way to take the trending subject and put your own spin on it. And the way to do that, a couple of things you can think about is, what is your style that you can implement, even though, there might be a floral trend at the moment. You could, how would you actually approach that? If you're really, really good at sort of ink and, pens and that kind of thing, that would be a great way to approach that subject matter. So same with design. If it's color blocking is the trend, then how would you actually put a spin on that?
What is color blocking?
What is color blocking? Well, it's when you take strong, bold colors that often contrast.
Okay.
They don't have to contrast, but often do, and you use them very kind of sparingly in a bold way. That's
okay.
Yeah.
I'm not very good with color
blocking.
Yeah, Lisa, you're like the color master in my mind, because color's hard.
Color is hard, but you see, there's a good approach. So if you got to figure out what you're good at. So if you are good at color, that would be a great spin on a particular topic.
Yeah.
For example. Yeah.
So I keep talking about this in my personal content as well, about fully leaning in. And I think what you're talking about is having this self-awareness to actually work out what you're good at, what you're not so good at. And if you're lucky enough to figure out what you're good at, I say lean into it more than ever. Don't just kind of have that as part of your repertoire. Be like, okay, I'm really going to take ownership of that. I'm really going to double down on it. And I think that alone often elevates you above many other people. And when we say standing out with your work and differentiating it, we're not saying you need to be completely unique. Many might be, but even differentiating to some degree is a positive thing. Because imagine you are part of the crowd and you're no different from anyone else, right? So there's millions of people like you. You're going to struggle. You might do something like leaning into a particular style, color palette, whatever it might be. And maybe that is something that 90% of people aren't doing, but 10% are. Yeah. Well, suddenly, you've improved your odds quite a bit, even though you're not completely unique.
Yeah, 100%. And, it's funny you say figuring out what you're good at. This is the Honest Designer show after all, so I'll come clean. I ask myself that question very regularly when I approach a product that I'm creating. One of the first things I ask myself is, what am I good at? I know that's a stupid question. I should know the answer, but you kind of need to remind yourself, because it's so super easy to go off down a rabbit hole of a particular trend and try and either mimic it or kind of sort of push yourself into a box that you don't belong or fit into.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do is, okay, so what am I good at, and how can I take what I'm good at and put a spin on that particular topic? So it's a really important question. And seriously, I do ask myself that often, and it's a good way to figure that out. And
I think it's nailing it down, because like for instance, lettering is not the niche it used to be. So just lettering in general is a massive now, and there's so many arms for it. It used to be just an offshoot of, maybe like a little offshoot of like calligraphy, and there was, it's just a small little thing, and it may be a little bit, with just craft circles quite locally, and now it's this massive thing. So just being good at lettering is not, it's fine maybe like 5-6 years ago, but now you really have to like nail it down into what that is. So for me, it's figure, like, you're asking my question, well, what in lettering am I good at? So, and I think, talking about like Lisa's products, about, if there's a trend and jumping on that trend, whereas for like me, I'm good at lettering and I was good at products, but my products weren't, it was like two roads that I could see from one to the other, but they weren't lining up. They weren't like joining, when you're going on a motorway and you're coming off one road onto another, and they sort of merge into one and then it disappears and you're just on one road. And I was like, I could see it, but it's like they weren't matching up. And then it wasn't until I started producing brushes that help people with their lettering that those two things finally came together.
Do you remember us having some of those chats?
Yeah.
As a group. And it was like, it was that David Brent thing where you just mesh your hands. You fused it. Yeah.
And then I can now, push right into it because it's hitting both of those targets with the stuff that helps people with their lettering, producing products, and so it's my passion and my income sort of matching
Mixed
finally.
into one. Yeah.
But it takes, don't expect this to come overnight. Sometimes you have to experiment, and sometimes you have to question. Sometimes you have to try things and see what works for you. I'm still figuring out stuff, even though I feel like I've got to a place where I know where I'm going. I'm still figuring out what that looks like. So don't feel
and
like
you always will be.
definitely.
It's the perpetual journey. But what we're talking about here is kind of niching, focus. And I know we did a couple of full episodes on niching, but it is a huge one when it comes to standing out, because we pay attention to people that are focused, because I think the human brain likes it. We like to look at something and go, oh, I understand what that person does. And if someone's like, oh, well, I kind of do like 101 different things and I'm spinning all these plates, your brain shuts off because you're like, that's confusing. I don't like it. That scares me. And so, niching is your best friend when it comes to differentiation, when it comes to being memorable and standing out. And what Ian touched on there is essentially combining. That can be a great way to do it. You're good at this and you also like this. You've got these two different skills, or you've got a skill and a passion, and you merge them. And that is a great way to create a unique, sum of the parts, which not that many people are doing. And to give you an example, I was on my group coaching thing this week, and there is a lovely lady who's joined the group, and she's an illustrator. And I was going through her work, and I was like, oh, this is great. She's doing a lot of cute stuff, but there seem to be millions of cute illustrators out there. And I was like, well, I think my favorite out of what you've done is your work with cats. And I was like, this is just hypothetical, but imagine if you just drew cute cats. And you did them like in funny poses and stuff that was relatable to cat lovers and really adorable. And they had little stuff they might be saying or thinking, or in a kind of meme-y illustrator way. And I'm not saying that's like the only strategy for her, but we just started kind of riffing on that. And it was like, well, if you did that, anyone who was a cat lover would be like referring your page, because they'd be like, you have to check this page out. And anyone who liked cats would land on her page and be like, oh, I'm going to follow because this is all for me. It's not that 8 posts ago she had a cat in the corner of the picture. It's all cats.
Yes.
And then she can, target hashtags around cats, and she can get on wider cat pages and get featured. And she's going to stick in people's minds. And so if she did that, anytime someone was like, oh my God, I love cats and I'm quite creative, I'd be like, check out this cat page. You'd love it. That's a bit of you all over. And I think that is the power of niching. So, it's not the only way, but it's certainly one way. And if you're willing to commit to that kind of extent, and go back and listen to the episodes we did on niching, there's obviously a lot more granular detail in them. But if you're listening to this episode thinking, how the hell do I stand out? I'm lost in this sea of noise. It feels terrible. No one notices or remembers me. Do consider niching. It's a really viable option.
I was just thinking how, people worry about not getting enough work in, or the problem with just doing that one thing. But what happens is that you can then do like an upsell. So someone you may target with, for instance, like the cats and the portraits, is that then they go, oh, I've got a dog too. Could you do the dog? Or, someone sees that and they go, well, I've got some hamsters that I want doing. No, she does. And
I've got a hairy child.
Yeah, a hairy child.
Imagery.
Yeah, it's true though.
Yeah, so it just means that there's like a focused way in. And what I think is that if you can ask your friends what you do, because like people struggle with the design industry, the creative industry. Like if I'd asked people like before I was doing lettering what I did, they were like, because like they didn't really get graphic design, and they're like, I don't really know. You do something in design. I mean, it's like, you need to know, like, use those around you. Use like, your friends on Facebook say, oh, what do I do? If they can't tell you, then online, where they don't actually know you yet, or they don't know you as well, they're not going to get who you are. So it's having that like elevator pitch of like, so for me, it's I create digital resources to help you with their lettering. So and having that sort of small sentence that sums up what you do, helps you to sort of stand out as well.
Absolutely, and
thanks to Tom for coming up with that.
It's
pretty slick. I need one of those.
We'll work on it. I think as well. It's stuff like, this isn't your main gig, but if someone was saying, "Oh, I really need someone who letters on objects," you would immediately spring to mind as the person I'd recommend, because not everyone's doing that. Most letterers are just doing it on a iPad or a sheet of paper and posting that, whereas you're doing it on footballs and guitars and balloons and all kinds of stuff. So you'd immediately spring to mind.
And the thing is,
it's different, right? It's different from what the masses are doing.
People with a camera over the head of an iPad, which I do all the time. You think, well, how can you do spin on that? There's like another artist who's taken the like animation function in Procreate to a whole new level, and does so. Rather than show how to do the illustration, shows how to do the animation, and it's really like the videos are amazing. So it's like that's jumping on something that's just come out in a bit of the technology, and then going all in on that. So all he does is now post animations, and he shows the process of making those animations step by step.
And I guarantee how he did it was he posted one animation and went, "God, that did particularly well."
Yeah, exactly.
So I might do another one. Oh, that did well too. I think I might be onto something here.
But it's definitely a marriage between what you just said now and the fact that he probably found it pretty easy to do. So, I mean, instead of spending hours and hours of trying to like figure stuff out and, teaching himself from scratch, he probably was good at that to begin with. So it wasn't a far jump. I think that's maybe where we also need to be clear, is that, standing out and doing something unusual needs to be something natural for you. It shouldn't be something that's going to take so long for you to achieve or not feel natural or a right fit, because that's also not on.
There are some things that I've had experience where I try it and it doesn't work, and so I try it again, and it feels like you're putting a shoe on that's not ever going to fit.
Yes, exactly.
And there are some, we can't be good at everything. There are some annoying people who are. But they're just some things that I struggle to do, and I'm like, okay, that's just something I'm not going to get, and that's fine because there's other things I could do. And
it also makes sense, doesn't it, from a time-saving point of view? Yeah,
and it's ones that you naturally gravitate towards, and you might not have found that yet, and so you just need to sort of try it and think, because it might be you pick up the iPad and the Apple Pencil, you just really get on with it really well, then use that. But it might be something else.
And and that whole thing of discovering what you're good at if you're not sure yet is quite a funny thing, because people often misjudge that as, well, it's so easy for them, everybody can do it, surely. They don't see it as a gift, if I can call it that, or a skill or a talent. So they just assume that everyone's good at it, but they're not. There's so many people out there that aren't. So don't, what I'm saying is, don't just glance by what you think comes naturally to you as a nothing. It could be your kind of ticket to standing out. Yeah,
like lettering never came naturally to me right off the get-go. And people seem to think that they see my work now and they go, well, I can never do what you do. And it was like, if I had that attitude, then I would never have started. It's just the fact that, you either got one attitude which is, oh, I never can do that. Or another attitude, or try and see if I can do it. I'm not very good at it yet. Yeah. And sometimes you won't be very good at it. And that's fine. It's willing to do that and maybe make a fool of yourself. But not putting that barrier up straight away, because you might end up thinking, falling on that. And I've seen lots of friends who've actually done, they've tried it and they've gone in a completely different avenue from what they've been doing. They might have been doing one thing and then they're suddenly doing something different, which is fine, but they didn't realize they were really good at this thing until they tried it.
I love it. And something I keep coming back to recently is I said this on this group call I had earlier in the week, and I went on a bit of a rant, and I was like, do you know how often I see something that is actually different that excites me? Like practically never. Because different by its definition is, kind of abnormal. And what's normal is always going to be the majority by definition. But I've become so blind to normal. I don't know about you guys. Like whenever I see it, I'm like, well, yeah, it's good, but it's just like everything else. Like my brain shuts off. And it doesn't have to be like the most unbelievable artwork or anything or lettering or whatever it might be. But whenever I see something that is truly different, I get so excited immediately. It's like a visceral emotional reaction where I'm like, oh, I haven't seen something like that. That's so cool. Like I get really, really pumped up about it. And to give you an example, someone on this call, this girl, Ria, very talented. She's an illustrator. And she does these illustrations. They're a bit abstract and they're very nice. But as I see them, I'm like, I do feel like I've seen quite a lot of similar stuff out there. So my brain, unfortunately, shuts off a bit, despite her talent. And then she started showing me some other work she'd been doing where she'd been getting photos from herself and other people and doodling on them, like on top of the photo, and doing like this amazing, like illustrated scene, but literally on top of the photo. And straight away my eyes lit up and I got really excited because I was like, I feel like I haven't really seen that hardly anywhere. I feel like maybe I've seen it once before, but I couldn't remember. And I'm like, I certainly haven't seen that in a long time, if ever. And the way she'd done it was so unique. And I was like, that looks awesome. That's so creative. That's so different. And I loved it instantly. And I feel like that is what plays out with the masses, whether it's the wider market you're trying to serve or clients or your own community on social media or whatever. That's the difference. It's people being lukewarm and switching their brain off versus people getting truly excited because it's something fresh. Because as I said in the intro to this episode, it has never been a busier world. It's so noisy out there. And so to have something that is not part of that noise is very rare. And when we see it, we gravitate towards it and we want to hold on to it and remember it and follow it. And that's just my opinion anyway. Do you guys experience that?
I do agree. The only thing that, if I'm playing devil's advocate, is that, the what do you say to people who counter that and say, but this style of drawing or painting is so popular and it's what's selling. Why would they choose my picture or my print on Etsy over that when we know that that's selling? You know what I'm trying to say? So
yeah, so to an extent, like, should they follow the trends because the trends are where the money is at?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good point. Ian, take this one because I'm choking today. I've got like a bit of a cough.
Drawing a blank.
Yeah, or not for one that's not.
It's all right.
Selling.
Sorry, I'm back, guys. I'm drinking loads of water. I've got a tickle in my throat today. Like I'm really not a fan of just following trends because if you picture a bell curve graph, invariably when you're following a trend, you often come to it late. It's very often that you kind of get there early and you feel the upswing of that trend and capitalize on it. Generally, it's kind of around saturation point. By the time you jump in, people have made their money, had their success, got their attention, and you're jumping into the party too late. You're looking at it and saying, wow, that's really popular. I want some of that. But you're failing to realize that that ship's almost sailed. It could now be at peak capacity or even on the downturn. People's interest has waned. It's oversaturated. It's overserved. There's too much supply versus the amount of demand. And I personally think it's a bit of a losing strategy. I much prefer to try and disrupt and innovate and do things differently.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same opinion, and I would rather spend the time that it takes to mimic or follow the trend on developing my own, hopefully one day, trend-setting idea.
Look at some of your most popular products. Portrait Creator. massive trendsetter. Loads of people have copied it, but you were so innovative with that. More recently, you've got your creature creator. That from an outside perspective and seeing your sales with us, it's been very popular. Yeah,
yeah, it has,
and it's been hugely popular. So I would say the reason for that is because it was different. If you had done another, some cute creatures or some lovely florals or the stuff that you have become known for, it's kind of like, well, it's more of the same from what people are seeing from you. And it's certainly more of the same in terms of what the wide market is producing, because everyone does that stuff. You've been very successful because you do it better than anyone else, in my opinion, but it still becomes samey after a point. Well, I think we talked last week about becoming stale and how we felt that in our own work sometimes. So you're differentiating not just from the wider market, but from yourself. You don't want to become a one-trick pony or become stale.
Well, this is which is another scary place to be in, and I think it's that whole thing of what I always push as an illustrator and somebody, as we've said before, get emails. How do I get started? All that kind of stuff. How do I make it in this industry? And for me, what I push the most is, do you want to be a follower or do you want to be a leader? And you could really either spend your time trying to perfect a trend, as you said, Tom, that is probably saturated and might only last for a couple of years, or if you're lucky, or do you really want to pour all your energy into developing something that is completely unique to you and that you can one day launch and be proud of and go, okay, maybe this time it wasn't a massive seller, but the next one I create might be, or the next one I create might be, and that's the goal, I think.
Imagine this. As I say, I truly believe that you're the best at what you do. And whenever we talk about your hold-up examples of people in that space, we literally we use you as the benchmark because you know how curated we are, and we see work and be like, well, it's good, but like it's no Lisa Glans in terms of quality. We literally say that in the office.
Do you have a Lisa Glans scale? Whether
yeah, we do. This is only 60% Lisa Glans. And so we do, and that's the benchmark. So let me paint a terrible picture for you. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and you lived in a world where every single person producing digital products was now producing practically exactly what you're doing. Every person. So all the letterers and the texture artists and everyone, they were all doing like cute critters and illustrations in a similar kind of media as you. And not only that, but a few dozen of them were even better than you.
More. Yeah.
They were more proficient.
Nightmare.
And no matter how strong your brand and all the rest of it, you'd still make sales, but it would really hurt you. Like massively. What would you do then?
Oh, the first thing would be to come up with something that is new and different and unique. That would be my first instinct.
Yeah.
And it's not because I want to be different to everybody else. My instinct would be so the market, i.e. customers, are sick and tired, or maybe they're not. They're saturated with seeing the same products. So how do I find that little crack in the market or that gap where I can serve them better, faster, or whatever? There's a whole bunch of kind of lists that you can tick off what service you're going to provide and put my spin on it, my technique, my personality. That would be my goal, and I'd be on it as fast as possible.
And I think you've kind of done that recently with the creature,
the Procreate, the brushes,
amazing. So why is it any different if the market changed and you reacted that way? Why is it different for people who are entering their market?
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
So if you're starting out, what people are doing is they're actually choosing to throw themselves into the situation that we just described, that you are immediately trying to jump away from because you see how hard that would be and how damaging that would be.
Yes.
And how
But I have to say, if you're new to something, following a trend is a good way to wet your feet. It's a good way to kind of.
It's a learning curve.
Yes,
for sure, but it's maybe not a viable model.
No, but I wouldn't wade in that pond too long. I'd kind of try and get out of it as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Algae and all sorts of things and stuff going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what have we been over so far? We've talked about focusing and niching.
Yeah.
We're starting to talk, I think, about actively paying attention to what's going on and deliberately running in the other direction.
Yeah.
So we've touched on that from Lisa's perspective there of digital products, but what about client work, for example? Like, this kind of falls back into maybe your niche, also your style. I think that's clearly a huge way you can differentiate. If everyone is doing one thing, like, what can you do differently? And I did this with our company. I'm sure I've told you guys this story before, where I literally did printouts of every competitor in the market, and I analyzed what they were doing well and what they were doing badly and what they should be doing that they weren't. And I ended up with this master list where I was like, what they're doing well, we're going to do it even better. What they're doing badly, we're going to fix that and make it good, or not do it, not screw up in that way. And there's a bunch of ideas over here where it's crazy they're not doing it and they should be, and we're going to do that. And so I literally ended up with a list of like, here's how we're going to be different. And like it's like a deliberate effort. I'm constantly looking at the landscape and being like, what aren't people doing? Where's that white space and how can we do it? And I think you can apply that to your client services 100%.
100%. And I was just going to say the quickest or easiest way to be sure that you are going to be a little bit different is to put a lot of energy and effort into your customer service or your client relations, because that, I think most graphic designers fall short to doing that. Well, certainly when I was graphic design, that was not a commonplace. For some reason, graphic designers didn't have that sense of customer care, which I found rather unusual. Because they're the ones who are paying you. And I think if you just apply that, you already have kicked out a whole bunch of competitors.
So maybe let's start with an exercise, and we could go through this now even. In client services, what is common? Start with what is everyone doing?
Well, they'll probably, so somebody will email them, I'm looking for a logo design. If it's a long-standing customer or a new customer, I'm looking for a logo design. What are your rates? And you might fire back an email and say, I charge X, and you might send them a form. Please fill out this form. Or you could really go the extra mile and ask them important questions about themselves, about their company, and already give them value and advice, possibly, depending on what they're asking for, without even charging. So the guy's going to walk away thinking, whoa, this person's already spent like an hour or whatever on my email, gone to so much trouble. Damn, I want to work with this person.
Yeah, so we're not saying go and do the design project for free before I hear all the naysayers. We're just saying invest more thought and personal care into your proposal phase.
Absolutely, especially if it's your first interaction with that person, because that's last, isn't it?
I've got an example. So this is like one on from my builder analogy.
Oh, nice.
I have missed him.
Missed him.
Oh no, it's one on or one back. This is an architect. Oh no, this is actually a true story. So we're looking to just sort of make our kitchen a little bit bigger. But we need an architect to look at it. And so a friend gave us a number of someone locally, and you go on their website and they give you this like free resource that runs through the whole process of how it's going to work, what you need to do. Before you even contact us, get a list of Pinterest board and stuff that you like, and so all the steps before you've even contacted them, which is really helpful because I've never used an architect before, and so I didn't know what to expect. So it's really good to have that sort of bit of hand holding. And I suppose it'd be the same sort of thing if you're approaching a designer, because you might have never used a designer before, and you don't know what the process is or what their process is of how you're going through it. Because a couple of times I've been on the actual other end of actually getting someone to design something for me, and it's a weird place to be because I'm like, I don't know,
Isn't
how
it?
does this work? Because I always made it up as I went along, so which was not a good way to be.
Do you find you slip slightly into the stuff you make fun of with clients because it's so easy to do so? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, can you just do it for free, mate? My cousin can. No, not that bad, but like, I think it's easy.
I'll give you a shout out on Instagram.
Yeah, like, I think it's easy. Like maybe start like adding on extra demands or requests, and then you have to check yourself, and you're like, oh wait, this is the stuff I advise designers how to do it.
But yeah, I suppose it must be a weird place to be. But the more you can hold
the
client's hand,
I agree,
the better, because they might be nervous about, because like design's one of those things where people don't understand the perceived value that it can bring if it's like maybe the first time they've used it. And so you've got to convince them that spending money on that designer is actually going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Like you would do, Tom, you did with consulting about their websites and how you could show them what this would do for their company.
Yeah.
You need that sort of trust. So they go, okay, I can see the value in using this person. I'm going to go with it because they've given me no reason not to trust them. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And that's just one stage, isn't it? Before you even got to the sort of design element. Imagine you've got like two similar designers designing similar sort of styles. The one that holds the hand, gives all the resources before they've even got to that, that's going to look much more attractive than this one, which is like, I don't know.
And stands out.
Yeah. So it just adds, it's like going into the old ice cream factory and just adding treats on top,
Yeah. And well, the expression Lisa used was extra mile. And we've talked about this before. When you go the extra mile, it's less crowded there. It's extra, i.e. it's what most people are not doing. And so by its very definition, that is different. And therefore you're going to stand out. And this can be, we've just touched here on some like onboarding for clients, as Ian mentioned, and client care and that kind of thing. But you can apply this to any area. It's like, how do I take it further? How do I push into that extra, 10%, 1%, whatever it might be? That is going to mean less people have pushed it that far. And I love playing with those extremes. And I know now we are getting a little bit into like how to differentiate and stand out as an individual or a brand. Let's take this back to the work itself. How do you get your work to stand out rather than yourself? And I've got 3 words here. I've got style, message, and subject / topic.
Subject's good. Yeah.
It's a subject, right? You can do all the stuff we're talking about from a company and brand building perspective. You can do it with your work. So what is everyone else posting, doing for their clients, etc.? What are they all doing? What's the done thing? What's normal? And how can you pivot or move away from that? Or better yet, how can you do the opposite? And I'll give you an example. Ian, you've probably seen this as you came up in the lettering world. But I would say, especially early on, there was a huge amount of like very generic wording and themes in lettering. And we've made fun of it before on the show. Run into the woods, be free, my love, and like all that kind of stuff. And I would say a few years ago, there were some people who started very proactively differentiating their work. Lauren Hom is one that springs to mind. And they started doing quotes that were much more real and less fluffy and generic and funny and sarcastic and stuff like that and witty. And those are the ones who really seem to break out, whereas all the generic people kind of just stayed down there and didn't get much traction. And so that was a direct result of what they were doing with their work, is they made it very different from what everyone else at the time was doing.
Yeah, and another good example, if you don't have the scope to necessarily play around, if I can call it that, with your client's work, you can definitely take on your own passion project, your own private thing, and share that on social. That, especially if it's the kind of work that you're trying to attract from clients. And I think a lot of designers get frustrated because they think, well, I'm dictated by a client's branding guidelines, and I can't really veer from that. But you could definitely start introducing your own work into your feed, and start showing your own personality and your natural gravitation towards the style that you want to do, and the palette and that kind of thing, because that's your freedom, it's your scope, you can do that.
Going back to Lauren Holm, she had a lot of success because of her passion projects and injecting her own interests into her work. And I think it's that sort of your work plus your interests. And if you're like, well, I've got nothing I'm interested in, then you need to go out and find something. Stuff. You know, because it's that combination it's quite a good thing. Sort of, you know, it can be quite random. It might be lettering and Rubik's cubes, and you just think, well, how can I combine that? Or like Tom likes his guitar. How can you combine that with illustration? You know, decorate guitars with illustration, and then you could start getting jobs.
Draw guitars.
Yeah. And this, like, we're creatives, people. Like, why are we not being more creative? Why are we being so lazy? Why are we just looking at what everyone else is doing and going, oh yeah, I'm going to do that as well?
The old Gary V made a good point the other day. He was talking about TikTok, and people are like, well, how do I get on that and get noticed? And he said, just spend 3 hours just getting to know the platform, see what's trending, see what other people are doing, and then put your own spin on it. And it's like, actually, that research is quite good. So see what other designers are doing, and then put your own spin on it.
Yeah.
And don't, I think, because and it's actually having that, giving yourself and allocating that time just to immerse yourself. Maybe it's on Behance looking at people's stuff. Maybe it's on Dribble looking at stuff, and looking at those who are gravitating to the top and what is it about them, and seeing how you can then implement that in your own business.
So I'm seeing like a model here in my head where it's like you're validating demand and interest levels. You're then observing what people are doing, and then you're actively pivoting slightly away from that and differentiating. And that's something I've seen a lot of people do. Using the Lauren Holm example, she looked and she would have noticed, okay, lettering is very popular. People clearly care about lettering. So I'm onto a winner here. But then I'm going to observe what people are doing. It's very generic. It's very boring. They're not standing out. I'm then going to pivot, and I'm going to play with my wording and make it more funny and engaging and whatnot. And you can see that model play out over and over again. We're not asking all of you listening at home to go and dream up the wackiest, wildest, most different scenario. It's not like, I want to create balloon animals and set them on fire and film it and the world will love it because it's so eccentric and different. That's not what we're saying. You can look at what everyone else is doing and what clearly has been proven to be popular and be like, okay, I'm going to take that, but I'm going to put, as Ian says, a unique spin on it.
Yeah. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to put your own spoke in it.
Nicely said.
Yeah. I think rather than saying put a unique spin, because that sounds like you have to come up with something amazing, just putting your spin is enough. Because that's you, it's your, into that you put your interests, you put your personality. And so not only look at, when you're looking at platforms, looking at other designers, see how their interests are being elevated.
Yeah.
Rather than just the skills and the design work, okay, how is the actual personality coming through, and how are they sort of merging the two together to elevate their work? And
all right,
for instance,
sorry, go ahead, mate.
And I was just thinking, Lauren Holm, she's now doing a course about how to stand out on, with your lettering.
Is she? Oh, wait, we should have had her on for this episode.
Really good. And so, that's by differentiating, she's now teaching others to differentiate. So, not only
what are you trying to put us out of a job, Lauren? Outrageous behavior.
Not only will you learn about what you can do for yourself, you can then help other people at the same time, which is really important. So you just got to it's a sort of really good way of just pushing your sort of business even further.
I want to play a little game, guys. You know, I like my games and my exercises.
With that wheel in the background.
Yeah, for anyone watching on YouTube, this is our team wheel for deciding crucial things, like what the team's going to get for lunch and who's going to choose it.
It's got your name on it, though.
Yeah, exactly. So we spin it. It's like, you get to pick the music today, kind of thing. So I'm going to count down. I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, and then after that, in your heads, not out loud, you have to pick a creative. First one that springs to mind. 3, 2, 1, go. Have you both got someone?
Oh,
No,
I've still got
blank.
Lauren Holm. Yeah, I can't.
You can't get her out of your head. It's not the first time you said that, people.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
All right, Lisa's got someone. How about you?
I've got someone.
All right. Can you tell me your people?
Victoria Johnson.
Okay. And
She's an illustrator.
good. Thank you for clarifying. And why did she spring to mind out of, the millions of people out there?
She has such a strong, definitive style.
Okay, that's checkbox number 1.
Yeah.
Unique style. What's her style?
It's painterly and a lot of mark making kind of stuff.
How's it different from what most do?
It's actually not exceptionally different in terms of her technique that she uses, but it's a combination of things that she does that overall makes her different.
Okay, how so?
So she chooses particular subject matters that she concentrates on. So you'll often see a bird or a butterfly or flowers in her work. It's kind of like her signature subject. She has a very strong signature palette, color palette.
Okay, what kind of colors?
So it's kind of blues and blush, cream, and mustard. All my favorite colors.
Is it similar colors to what most people are using?
Well, I would say yes, but it's probably how she's using it. So when she uses pink, it's an accent that's quite strong. It's striking. So she'll have, she'll have like a subdued hues of kind of peaches. Browns and that kind of thing. And then she'll have this pop of pink that's so striking. So none of the color combinations are necessarily unique, but it's how she actually uses them that make her stand out.
Anything else that kind of makes her stand out in your mind that made her pop in your head?
Well, I don't know if it's something that stands out, but I guess it does. She's willing to share what she's learned along the way. So it's a combination of not only is she a successful licensing artist, she actually teaches others how to become good licensing artists. So it's sharing her work and be willing and free to do that.
Okay. So anything else? Or is that the main stuff?
I would say that's the main stuff.
Okay. So this is part of the exercise. How you mentioned she's a teacher. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you could list hundreds, if not thousands, of illustrators. Maybe not. You're in that world, but yeah, hundreds. How many, roughly, what percentage of those are teaching and sharing what they know in the same way that she is?
You see, I'm a bad example to ask that because I actually follow those that do teach.
Okay. But let's run with it, or maybe think of all the illustrators out there. How many do you think are teaching?
I think a lot of them. I think there's a very small percentage of illustrators who do it for a living that are teaching, as well.
Okay, like roughly, ballpark.
Let's give it a 5%.
Okay.
Out of all the illustrators in the world, maybe 5% are teaching.
Cool. Maybe even less, but 5%. Absolutely.
Even less.
And within that, and I don't say this to be disparaging, to Victoria, you said, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
I'm guessing she might not be the greatest teacher in the whole world. She's probably amazing. Within that 5%, she's probably one of the absolute best, but maybe not the best, or?
She actually is unusual in her teaching. She does not do videos. She only teaches via like downloadable PDF, text. Mm-hmm. So That in itself is unusual these days. Everyone's expecting to be taught, via video or a show and tell kind of thing.
Okay, so that's different as well.
Yeah.
And how many illustrators can you think of who use like really strong, bright highlights like she does?
Again, bad example, because those are the kind of people I'm
But again, out of most illustrators.
You know what the thing is, if I look at a lot of the work that's out there, because I obviously take a lot of courses, so you get to see a lot of work that students create, and most students are shy to use strong colors. Most students prefer to go with the subdued sort of tones, and I find that illustrators that are willing to explore colors and be adventurous, those are the ones that are standing out.
You're drawn to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe again 5% who are brave enough,
maybe 5%
to kind of do that. And then how many out of the total do you think are doing like butterflies and birds and that kind of thing?
I think a lot, because that is a subject matter that sells well, which is why it's so important to be so unique in a sea of licensing work that is the same subject matter.
Okay, so maybe 30% or something.
Yeah.
Are doing that. So arguably, if she was, had nothing special about her apart from the fact she drew butterflies and birds, she probably wouldn't have sprung to mind.
No.
And if she just had strong colours, maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't have sprung to mind. Debatable, because you said, hundreds. So
yeah, it's definitely a combination of the factors that, in her particular case.
Because that was going to be my question. It sounds like you follow hundreds of people who all map to your particular likes and tastes.
Yes.
So why her out of those hundreds?
I guess because I have been into her work lately more than everybody else's, just because I've recently taken one of her courses. So yeah, difficult question.
So that kind of comes. That comes back to the teaching though, because that's part of her thing. So that is standing out and reaching you in different ways. So
exactly.
I can't remember if I shared this with you guys, but I was listening to the one podcast that I do actually listen to. And
I mean, not ours.
Yeah, sadly not. And the host gave this fantastic example that I haven't stopped thinking about since I heard it, and it was that to be the best in the world at something, you don't have to be the best in the world at something. You can just be in the top, 5%, 10%, 1%, whatever it might be, in several areas. And then when these combine, it creates a unique recipe that makes you the best. And the example that he gave was the footballer Ronaldo. And he was saying, okay, so when you really break down Ronaldo, he's considered by many to be the greatest in the world right now. And is he the fastest footballer? Like, no, he's not. He's probably in the top 5%. Like, he's pretty damn quick, but he's not the fastest. Is he the best header of the ball? Again, no. He's very good, but there are people who are better in the air and better with the head. Is he the best like dribbler of the ball? Is he the most prolific in all kinds of areas? And the answer is normally no. There's normally someone who's better statistically in those areas. But when you combine all of those things, he is the best, most consistent one that kind of maps across the bunch. And that's really stayed with me, because I think people get intimidated by the fact of like, well, I'm not going to stand out because I'm never going to be as good as them, or I'm never going to be the best at that. It's like, actually, when you can just be very good or like pretty good across a range of disciplines or facets of your character and your work, that can be enough to concoct into a recipe that actually becomes highly compelling to people.
Definitely. It's as you said, it's a combination of these elements that together as a unit makes you into something special. So as you said, you don't have to be killing it necessarily in one area only. It's definitely, it's a combination for sure.
I think so. And I look at that with you, Lisa. It's like, you are one of the absolute strongest people I know with colors. You've got a whimsical, you've got a whimsical style to your work. You also teach. Like, there's a lot of things that you do, but I'm sure if we really track down people, there would be some absolute like color master out there, who might be better than you in that area. But you're right up there across a range of things, and that's why you kind of combine in my head to be in my opinion,
Okay.
the best in that space. So
thank you, Tom. Full of the compliments.
Yeah, I
tonight.
know. I'm very, very complimented.
What's going on?
I don't like it. I want to slip back into bullying here.
With Lisa, she says about, I'm rubbish at social media, but she's good. Like you say, she's consistent over, like, she's got a Skillshare or 2 Skillshare classes, maybe a 3rd at some point.
Yes, will be soon.
You posted today on Instagram. You regularly send out newsletters. You regularly make products. You make products much more regularly than I do, and you're just consistent all over there. So there's people finding you through a lot of different avenues, not just social media, where everybody thinks the party's at, but it's actually all these. There's a lot of people I follow on Instagram because I found them on Skillshare. And I would never have found them if it wasn't for the fact that they were teaching.
Yes,
or
exactly.
Yeah.
It might be they were selling a product somewhere, and I would never have found them if I hadn't have stumbled across their product. So it's all these different entry points make, rather than just be, you might be amazing on doing Instagram videos, but if it's the only place that people find you, it limits, because on another channel you might not be, doing well, and so it only limits you to that one thing, whereas you're consistent over a board of different things, which is a better place to be, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of gets back to some of the early debates we had on the show about jack of all trades and all that kind of stuff. It's like an interesting spin of that, because I'd say you can do both. You can niche, or you can just be a logo designer, but within that you can actually be very strong across a variety of areas within that niche, and therefore stand out and break through the noise and so on by being the best at being you.
I think you have to get, what I look at it like is going through a door, finding this niche door.
Yeah.
And it's like a little door, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or whatever it is. One of those ones where you're walking down, it gets really smaller and smaller.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, something like that. The niche door is really tiny, and it's really scary because you think, is there going to be any work inside that door?
Yeah.
You open that door, you go through, and you suddenly you're in this massive hall.
It's like the TARDIS.
Huge. And you're like, I didn't
and you're the only one there.
That once you go through, there's just so much opportunity once you're niche down. But until you go through that, you do find it, because I feel like my business has grown massively by just sticking with one thing. And once I committed to that, just going to be about lettering. I thought lettering was just going to be a bolt-on. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to go all in on lettering. And then it opened me up to sort of bigger clients. It opened me up to, teaching, and it opened me up to YouTube and Instagram, and all these different things and all these different opportunities that I'd never thought unless I'd ploughed into it. So
yeah, I love that. You're such a fantastic, living example of what we talk about on the show with what you've done with that. So sadly, because I believe we're going to crank out another episode, we might have to call time on this one so we can get it all done for you listeners. But just to give a little wrap up of today, some of the notes I've got here are ways to differentiate. You can put a unique spin or your unique personality or shtick on what you're doing and fully lean into that. You can niche and focus more. You can do this by combining different elements and passions quite often. You can differentiate with your style by developing more unique style. This can include colors, brush marks, all kinds of things. And often it's the combination of these various factors which ends up making you stand out. You can stand out with the message or the subject inherent in your work. And you can do this by paying attention to what everyone else is doing. You can run the other direction and do the complete antithesis if you want, but equally, just some small pivots here and there can actually massively break through and help you stand out. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can add a unique spoke, as Lisa said. And finally, being more human. Often we stand out by going the extra mile, by putting ourselves out there, being authentic and being a human, which we touched on a lot in this show. Again, most people don't bother. And so inherently by doing that stuff, you stand out as well as your work. So Boom. How about that for a little summary, guys?
Damn, that's good. That sounds brilliant. Did we really say all that?
Can I do like a book thingy recommendation that will help? So
Absolutely.
So there's a book which I got first, but this is like a little card pack, which I quite like, and it's called Think Pack from an author, Michael McCulco. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong.
Yeah.
But it's called Thinker Toys is the book. And it's all about, looking for unique things by like either combining two different items, two different ideas, or subtracting something from one idea, and so it's just ways of brainstorming how you can do a unique spin on stuff. So that's really good. And there's other ones as well, similar sort of concept to that, but that's one I've read, and it's really good at sort of getting your brain into a game, to think differently in terms of, how can I put a different spin on that?
I love it. Thanks, man.
Nice.
Well, on that note, that is all we got time for today, guys, but I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Bye from us.
Cheerio.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.